أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على المصطفى محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم واللعنة الدائمة على أعدائهم أجمعين إلى قيام يوم الدين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي اللهم كن لوليك الحجة بن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. Right, before Ashura we were looking at the stage of Sakrat al-Maut. We're still in that stage. And that is the first stage from the stages of the hereafter and the last stage from the stages of ad-dunya. So it's a transitionary stage. Jayyid. And that is when the soul is being pulled out of the human's body. Up until now, we've covered multiple topics regarding Sakrat al-Maut. We've mentioned the difficulties that a person goes through when he's about to pass away. We've also mentioned what are certain deeds we can do from now in ad-dunya that will make our moments in Sakrat al-Maut easier, meaning they will facilitate, those deeds will facilitate the affairs or the matters of Sakrat al-Maut. We also mentioned al-adila. What is al-adila? The danger of losing faith, God forbid, before dying and losing our test in ad-dunya, not losing our test, sorry, failing our test in ad-dunya. So we covered all those topics. And today, inshallah, we want to focus on 2 points. Number one, we want to start with a narration by Imam Ali alayhi salam, in which he gives an admonishment to his companions and to us. And we are always in need of these admonishments because they cleanse our souls, remind us of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the hereafter, and bring us closer to God subhanahu wa ta'ala, especially if we're, sinking in the oceans of sins, God forbid. Secondly, we're going to mention what should be done or what is recommended to be done by those who witness a believer in Sakrat al-Maut. We mentioned what can someone do before he dies, before he gets to that stage, to make his moment in Sakrat al-Maut or Sakarat al-Maut easier. But what about us? If I have a family member or a friend or a brother in faith who's dying in front of me, what is my duty in that case? What can I do or what should I do in regards to that believer? That's what we will focus on, inshallah. I don't think we'll have enough time to cover the topic fully today, so there will probably be a continuation to this topic next week if we are still alive, inshallah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All right, so we're going to start with a hadith, the narration in Bihar al-Anwar by Imam Ali alayhi salam. I sent you the hadith on the chat section. Allama al-Majlisi rahmatullah alayhi cites Ikhtiyar ibn al-Baqi. So the author of that book says that Imam al-Sadiq, Ja'far ibn Muhammad alayhi salam, is narrated to have said, Amirul Mu'mineen alayhi salam bil maqbara. The commander of the faithful went by the graveyard. Which graveyard? It does not say. Perhaps he went by the graveyard of Baqiyah. Perhaps he went by a different graveyard. Allahu al-alim. وَيُرْوَى بِالْمَقَابِرِ. And it is narrated that he went by graveyards, not just one, multiple graveyards. فَقَالَ السَّلَامُ عَلَيْكُمْ يَا أَهْلَ الْمَقْبَرَةِ. And so he said, he saluted those who had passed away. Peace be upon you, O people of the graveyard. وَالتُّرْبَةِ. And O people of the soil or the dust. He says this because we know that the human being is buried inside the earth. So inside the soil or the dust. اعلموا أن المنازل بعدكم قد سكنت. He tells them, no, I have something to tell you. No, be certain that other people are living inside your houses. So it's as if he's saying, if you ask us about your houses, the houses are still existing, but there are new inhabitants in those houses. Perhaps their relatives, their inheritors, or other people. God knows. وأن الأموال بعدكم قد قسمت. Or you can read it قد قسمت. He says, and as for your wealth, after your death, your wealth has been distributed. جيد. So your wealth exists, but it has been taken by someone else. Again, perhaps by their inheritors. وأن الأزواج بعدكم قد نكحت. And as for your spouses, they've gotten married to other individuals. And this applies to both, males and females. جيد. A husband, مثلا, loses his wife. After he loses his wife, he naturally remarries. A lady, مثلا, loses her husband. After she loses her husband, very likely she'll get married again. Some women say they refrain from marriage after they lose their husbands, but it's not wajib on them to do so. It's halal for them to get remarried. So the Imam says, alayhi salam, the spouses have gotten remarried. فَهَذَا خَبَرُ مَا عِنْدَنَا. This is the piece of news that we have for you. So he's informing them of what has happened in ad-dunya. It's as if he's saying that life continued after you. And that is the sad reality, right? Someone passes away, life continues. Life has to continue. فَمَا خَبَرُ مَا عِنْدَكُمْ. But what piece of news do you have for us? جيد. What do you need to tell us or have to tell us? فَأَجَابَهُ هَاتِفٌ مِنَ الْمَقَابِرِ. Here, someone answered the Imam alayhi salam. Someone answered the Imam, meaning someone who had already passed away. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, based on the context we understand, Allah Azza wa Jal created this miracle for Imam Ali alayhi salam, so that the people heard. They heard what that person who passed away was saying. If we go and visit the mu'mineen who passed away, they hear us and they know about us. Jayid, they know about us, but we don't hear them. In this case, because Imam Ali alayhi salam was speaking to the dead, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, excuse me, Allah ta'ala allowed those who were with the Imam to hear the response of a person who had passed away. So what did he say? It says here, فَأَجَابَهُ هَاتِفٌ مِنَ الْمَقَابِرِ نَسْمَعْ صَوْتَهُ وَلَا نَرَى شَخْصَهُ. Someone answered the Imam, and his voice could be heard, but his figure could not be seen. They did not know who it was. Obviously, Imam Ali knew, alayhi salam. عليك السلام يا أمير المؤمنين ورحمة الله وبركاته. Peace be upon you, O Commander of the Faithful, and may Allah's blessings and mercy descend upon you. أما خبر ما عندنا. As for the piece of news that we have to say, or the piece of news that we want to convey. فقد وجدنا ما وعدناه. He said, I have three things to tell you. Number one, we found what we were promised. That's number one. And I want you to think about this, because it's a deep message. We found what we were promised, meaning we found that death was a reality. One might say, do people even doubt in death? Theoretically, no. Practically, yes. Right? Theoretically, no one doubts in death. But on a practical level, some people behave as if they will not die, especially certain tyrants who, shed blood of thousands and thousands, in fact, millions of people. If they believed in death and believed in the hereafter, they wouldn't do that. Jayid. So we found death to be a reality. What else did you find? We found what came after death. We found the barzakh. There is a barzakh. There is, for example, Malak al-Maut alayhi salam. There truly is an angel called the angel of death alayhi salam who came to us and took our souls. We found that there is something called heaven, there is something called hellfire. So he says, وَجَدْنَا مَا وُعِدْنَا. We found what promised. وَرَبِحْنَا مَا قَدَّمْنَا. The second thing he wanted to say, he wanted to convey, the second message he wanted to convey was, we gained whatever we brought forth. And that's also a deep message. Meaning, whatever we gave in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we found it waiting for us in al-akhirah. You give sadaqah, right? For example, sadaqah is a very clear example. You give sadaqah, you pay charity. When you're paying charity, at first glance, it seems like you're losing money. Sah? But the Quran says you're not losing anything. Why? Because number one, that money that you've paid as sadaqah, you'll find it waiting for you in the hereafter. You're placing it in the divine bank, the bank of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the eternal bank. Secondly, Allah ta'ala returns, He gives you back whatever you paid in ad-dunya, but He multiplies it. So the least you get by paying sadaqah is that the money you paid will be multiplied by 10. Paid $1, you get $10 from Allah ta'ala. You pay $2, you get 20 at least. That's a promise from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if He wants to give more, He can give more. He is the all generous Azza wa Jal. Jayyid. So he says, رَبِحْنَا مَا قَدَّمْنَاهُ. Whatever we brought forward, we actually gained it. We didn't lose it. We found it in the hereafter. Does this only apply to money? What do you think? No. Does it only apply to money? It applies to other matters as well, right? Like what? Can you think of an example? Ahsantum? Ahsantum? Abdullah? Salah? Hassan says helping a believer. Ahsantum. So when you give, for example, when you sacrifice your time, fi sabilillah, the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You sacrifice your energy, fi sabilillah, right? For the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal. You do something good to please Allah, to help your community. Those deeds, you'll find them where? Waiting for you in al-akhirah. The energy you're wasting is not actually being wasted. It's being stored in al-akhirah. The time you're wasting is not being wasted. There's no such thing, no such thing as wasting my time on hasanat. You're not wasting time. You're making use of your time. Then he says, the third message is, he says, وَخَسِرْنَا مَا خَلَّفْنَا. But we've lost whatever we left behind. We lost it. For example, we go back to money. Jayyid, you have an amount of wealth. You don't give it fi sabilillah. You don't use it in a way that pleases Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Rather, you just store it. You keep it on the side. You might think that you're gaining, but in reality, you're not gaining. You're losing. Because you're not giving it in a way, you're not giving it or using it in a way that pleases Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One might say, so I'm not allowed to, store a little bit of money for myself, for my children, in case, for example, I die. No, you're allowed. That's fine. If you store money for the sake of your children, provided that you pay your homes, you pay your zakat, you pay your mandatory payments, that's allowed. But in this case, when you're storing an amount of money for your children in case you pass away, consider that deed to be a deed done fi sabilillah, right? Because you want to help your children as well. Jayyid. Nonetheless, here the hadith, when it says وَخَسِرْنَا مَا خَلَّفْنَا, we've lost what we left behind, it indicates that when one does not make use of the items that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him fi sabilillah, in the path of Allah Azza wa Jalla, is not actually gaining anything. He's losing those items, because it's only a matter of time until he passes away and he abandons those items. So here, the person who passed away wants to give the message that we should make use of our time in a dunya before it's too late, and use the blessings that Allah Ta'ala has given us to please Allah Azza wa Jal in any way or form that pleases God. فالتفت إلى أصحابه. So the Imam alayhi salam turned to his companions. فقال أسمعتم? Did you hear what he said? قالوا نعم يا أمير المؤمنين. He said, yes, O Commander of the faithful. قال فتزودوا. That being said, you heard him, right? Now, تزودوا. Gather and collect provisions. فإن خير الزاد التقوى. For the best provision is fearing Allah Ta'ala. The best provision is piety. Here, the Imam alayhi salam reminded them and reminds us of the Quranic verse, وَتَزَوَّدُوا فَإِنَّ خَيْرَ الزَّادِ التَّقْوَى, which basically tells you that one day you're going to travel. You're going to travel to the hereafter. And naturally, when we travel, we take luggage bags with us, right? In the luggage bag, you'll find what? You'll find the accessories, the items, and the clothing that you'll need throughout your travel. Ahsantum. In fact, what's interesting is when we travel, usually, we'll bring items with us that we might need. As in, we're not certain we're going to need these items, but we assume perhaps I'll need this, so I'll bring it with me. مثلا lotion. Perhaps I'll need lotion. I'll bring it with me. Perhaps I'm going to get sick. I'm not sure I will get sick. I'm not sure. But perhaps I will get sick. I bring medication with me, just in case. جيد? A warm jacket and other kinds of accessories or items. جيد? If this applies to a person's travel in a dunya, then it should apply to a person's travel where? In al-akhirah, right? The ultimate travel, the everlasting travel. So, knowing that ultimately it's only a matter of time before we travel, before we go to al-akhirah, a wise man or a wise woman will try to prepare himself or herself as much as possible for that travel by doing as many good deeds as possible before it's too late. Every good deed counts, and you never know which good deed leads you to heaven. Sometimes we perform a light, a small, a tiny good deed, but that tiny, light, a small good deed leads us to heaven on the day of judgment. Subhanallah. Jayt. So this is the admonishment of the Commander salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayh. That being said, let's go back to Sakrat al-Maut. If someone is in the state of Sakrat al-Maut, he's in what we call ihtidar, right? For example, you have a family member or a friend who's very sick, and the doctors, they assume that it's only a matter of hours or days before he passes away, and then you start to see that his state is changing, and his oxygen level is dropping, his heart مثلا beats are also dropping. So you assume that خلاص, these are the final moments. Sometimes right? You know that someone is in that state. So now what do we do? What should be done? Here we have to keep in mind that there are recommended deeds, several recommended deeds that can or should be done. But then again, there's a deed that's wajib. There's something wajib that should be done. So we'll start with the wajib, and then we'll go to the recommended deeds. What is wajib when someone is in the state of sakrat al-maut? Let me go to the board so we can write these points down. I always like to use the board. Yeah, let's go to the board. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Move the camera. اللهم صل على محمد وآل Ya Allah al-Kareem. Ya Sahara. All right. So we're going to write what should be done by fellow believers when another believer is about to die, meaning in the state of Sakrat al-Maut, in the stage of Sakrat al-Maut, about to die. So we'll start with the wajib deed. What's wajib based on mandatory precaution according to Sayyid al-Sistani Damadilluh is we must direct the believer towards the Qibla. Towards the Qibla. تفضل حبيبي. السلام عليكم. No, تفضل. If you want to come in. هلا we'll talk, but I'm recording. I'll give you the details after. If you want to come in, you can come in. Yeah, no problem. We must direct the believer towards the Qibla. Here we're talking about the body. The body. So how do we direct him towards the Qibla? We make him sleep on his back, such that his feet are towards the Qibla, such that if the believer sat down, his face would be facing the Qibla. Okay? This is based on mandatory precaution according to Sayyid Sistani. Based on, I'm going to write MP. MP means mandatory precaution. طبعا السيد السيستاني دام ظله mentions this issue in Minhaj al-Salihin. Because in Minhaj, the Maraja mentioned the main ahkam, right? The main laws, and this is part of the laws, right? Where do we find these laws? If you want to read, you can find them in the section regarding Ghusl al-Mayyit. Okay? So in the book of Tahara, in the chapter of Tahara, we speak about, the Maraja speak about the aghsal, the ritual baths. One of the wajib, one of the mandatory ritual baths is called Ghusl al-Mayyit. And that's the bath that we give to someone who passed away. It's not wajib on him to take the bath. It's wajib on us to give him the bath because he passed away, right? So his taklif is done. But it's wajib on us to give the bath to that person who passed away. To wash his body, basically. So, because right now is that today? Tuesday. Inshallah. No problem. Assalamu alaikum. Wa iyaakum. So, because ihtidar, the moments of Sakarat al-Maut, are connected to the topic of Ghusl al-Mayyit, in that chapter or sub-chapter, the Maraja will mention not only Ghusl al-Mayyit, they'll mention ihtidar, what should be done during ihtidar. They'll mention Ghusl al-Mayyit, and they'll mention what comes after Ghusl al-Mayyit. Takfeen, Tahnit, Takfeen, Salat al-Mayyit, and Dafn. One might object and say, but this is not part of Ghusl. Sahih. It's not part of Ghusl, but it's connected to it. It's connected to the topic of death. So all of those ahkam, the rulings regarding, the laws regarding ihtidar, the laws regarding burial, takfeen, shrouding the body, tahnit, they're all mentioned in that chapter of fiqh, in the chapter of tahara, specifically when they speak about ghusl al-mayyit. Sayyid al-Sistani mentions what? He says that if the person who is passing away is able to direct himself to the Qibla on his own, then based on the recommended precaution, he should do it. Provided that he will not feel pain or will not get harmed if he does it on his own. Afwan, a correction, he should do it on his own based on recommended precaution if he's able to do so. Yeah, disregard the issue of pain and harm. Okay? Now, one might say, but is this even possible? Yes. Sometimes the person who's passing away is still awake and he's aware of what's happening around him. And he realizes that these are his final moments. Tamam? An example of that, a clear example, is someone who's مثلا fighting and gets shot, and then he's taking his last breath, but he's aware of what's happening beside him. Tamam? So he can, if he has the power, of course, he can face the Qibla. Okay, another point that the Sayyid Sistani mentions is it is recommended to take the person who's passing away to his musalla, meaning to the place where he would pray, if he is going through a tough time during sakarat al-maut. Sometimes people go through tough times, what we call in Arabic shiddat al-naza. So it seems that the soul is being pulled out of the body, but that event in itself is quite intense. So if it's intense, if it's being pulled out with difficulty, then it's recommended for us to take that individual where? To his musalla, to the place where he would pray. Provided that moving him there will not cause him any pain or harm. Okay? So let's write that down. This is recommended. It's not wajib, but it's recommended. It seems that taking him to his musalla will help him. So the second point we want to write is, if the person goes through difficulty as his soul is departing from this world, then it will be recommended that we take him to his musalla, meaning the place where he would pray. Provided that he doesn't go through pain or harm because of that. Again, when we talk about difficulty, we're talking about shiddat al-naza. The soul is being pulled out, but not with ease. Okay, this is recommended. Now, one might tell me, but sometimes we're unable to do that. If you're unable to do that, then no problem. It's not wajib. جيد. Sometimes you can't do it. For example, your family member is in the hospital, on the bed, in the ICU, جيد, and you can't move him anywhere else. If you move him, then he'll die. So you have to keep him there until Allah Ta'ala takes his soul. Yes. That's possible. He's in the hospital. That's a good question, by the way. He's in the hospital, جيد, and you want to make him face the qibla. You can simply move the bed, move it in a way where his feet will be towards the qibla, directed towards the qibla. Yeah, yeah, جيد. Now, usually the staff should accommodate, they should accept these matters. If you explain to them that it's a religious issue and whatnot, then they'll help you do it. طيب, I think we're out of time. Yes, I'm going to have to stop the class here. We still have one more class. والحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على المصطفى محمد وآله الطاهرين.